I was working overnight security on New Year's Eve because I needed the money. The building was a 12-story corporate office downtown. Nothing fancy, just law firms, accounting offices, and a few tech startups that shut down early for the holidays. Everyone wanted to be home before midnight. I didn't really care. I figured it would be an easy shift. Sit in the lobby, watch the cameras, make my hourly rounds, and listen to fireworks echo between buildings once the new year hit. By 9 p.m., the place was already empty. The last employee waved at me on the way out and said, "Happy New Year," like he felt bad leaving someone behind. The doors locked automatically behind him, and the building settled into that hollow quiet that only large, empty spaces have. Every sound felt bigger than it should have been. My footsteps, the buzz of the lights, the low hum of the ventilation system. I signed into the security desk computer like normal. Everything checked out. Cameras were clear, doors were sealed, elevators parked on the first floor. At around 11:30 p.m., the city outside started getting loud. I could hear distant music, shouting, car horns, and fireworks popping somewhere above the rooftops. It felt strange being separated from it all by thick glass and concrete, like I was watching the world celebrate from underwater. I remember checking the clock above the reception desk. 11:41 p.m. The lobby clock was synced with the building's internal system. Every screen in the place, desk computers, hallway clocks, elevator displays, ran off the same time server. At least, they were supposed to. Around 11:55, I stood up to stretch and did a quick walk through the lobby. That's when I noticed the first thing that felt off. The clock hadn't moved, still 11:41 p.m. At first, I assumed I just hadn't been paying attention, but when I checked my phone, it read 11:55 exactly. I refreshed the screen. Same time. I walked back to the desk and checked the computer system clock. 11:41 p.m. Every clock in the lobby, every digital display was stuck on the same minute. I radioed my supervisor, mostly to make a joke about it. "Hey, you seeing a time glitch on your end?" I asked. No response. I figured the system froze. It happens. Annoying, but not scary. Then the elevator dinged. I hadn't called it. The sound echoed through the empty lobby, sharper than it should have been. The elevator doors slid open slowly, revealing an empty car lit by that pale fluorescent glow. No footsteps, no voices, just open doors. I walked over and looked inside. Nothing unusual, no one hiding, no malfunction alerts. The elevator display above the doors also read 11:41 p.m. That's when the building's PA system clicked on. There was a brief burst of static, followed by a sound that didn't belong there. Applause, not canned applause, real people, dozens of them, cheering and clapping like they were in a large room together. Then a voice, shouted, distant but clear. 10! I froze. The sound wasn't coming from the lobby speakers directly. It felt like it was echoing up the stairwells, bouncing down the hallways, bleeding through the walls. 9! I grabbed my radio again. "Dispatch, this is lobby security. Anyone else hearing?" The radio hissed and went dead. 8! I ran to the camera monitors. Every feed showed empty hallways, empty offices, empty stairwells, but the countdown continued. 7, 6. I felt my stomach drop. The voices didn't sound threatening. They sounded happy, excited, like a crowd about to celebrate something big. 5. I backed away from the desk, suddenly very aware of how alone I was. 4. I tried calling my supervisor on my phone. No signal, not even an error message, just silence. 3. The city noise outside vanished. No fireworks, no horns, no people. The building felt sealed off from the rest of the world. 2. Every light in the lobby flickered once. 1. The lights went out completely. Total darkness. No emergency lights, no glow from outside, no exit signs, just black. I stood there, barely breathing, afraid to move in case I bumped into something or someone. Then, in the darkness, every screen turned back on at once. The lobby lights snapped on, the elevator doors closed, the PA system went silent, and every clock changed. 12 a.m. January the 1st. The city noise rushed back all at once, fireworks exploding, people cheering somewhere far away, like nothing had happened. I stood there for a long time, waiting for my heart rate to slow down. I told myself it was a glitch, some kind of system malfunction. Maybe someone hacked the PA. Maybe I was just tired. At 12:10 a.m., my supervisor finally radioed in. "Hey," he said casually, "everything okay? You went quiet." I told him everything, the clocks, the voices, the blackout. There was a pause on the line. "That's weird," he said slowly, "because according to the logs, no one clocked in tonight." I laughed nervously and told him to stop messing with me. "I'm serious," he said. "Your badge never registered. System shows the building empty since 6 p.m. I looked down at my uniform. My badge was clipped right where it always was. I finished the shift without anything else happening, but I didn't sleep when I got home. A few days later, I asked the building manager about it. He didn't laugh. He told me that years ago, before I worked there, the building hosted a New Year's Eve event on the top floors, a private party, way over capacity. Just before midnight, a power failure locked the stairwell doors. The elevators shut down, people were trapped, emergency systems failed. The official reports never mentioned what time everyone realized they weren't getting out. But witnesses said the last thing heard over the building's PA system was a countdown. We didn't get an invitation. That's the first thing that should have made us leave. It was New Year's Eve, and my phone kept buzzing with messages from different group chats. People asking where the parties were, who had alcohol, who knew somewhere that wasn't already packed. Around 10:30 p.m., someone posted an address. No name, no explanation, just, "Party here, still going." A few people reacted with fire emojis. Someone said they'd already been there for an hour and it was normal. That was enough for us. There were 5 of us total. We drove across town, following the GPS into a quiet residential neighborhood that felt wrong for a party. No cars lining the street, no music spilling into the road, just dark houses and bare trees. Then we saw it. One house halfway down the block had every light on. Music thumped softly through the walls. People were visible through the windows, moving, dancing, raising cups. It looked alive. We parked and walked up without knocking. The front door was unlocked. Inside, it was packed. At least 30 people, maybe more. Loud enough to feel real, but not chaotic. Everyone looked normal. College age, casual clothes. Some dressed nicer for New Year's. No costumes, no masks. No one asked who we were. That felt weird, but not weird enough to leave. We grabbed drinks from the kitchen. No host, no decorations, no Happy New Year banner, just people hanging out like they'd been there 100 times before. The house itself felt old, not run down, just outdated. Thick carpet, narrow hallways, low ceilings. The air smelled faintly like smoke, even though no one was smoking. I checked the time. 11:52 p.m. People started gathering in the living room where an old flat-screen TV sat mounted on the wall. Someone shouted that we were doing the countdown there. The TV turned on by itself. At first, it showed static. Then it cleared to a camera feed of the front of the house, the street, our cars, the empty sidewalk. Someone laughed and said it was security footage. I didn't laugh because the feed wasn't delayed, it was live. At 11:58, the room quieted. Not suddenly, just slowly, like everyone subconsciously decided to stop talking at the same time. The countdown started. 10, 9, everyone joined in, smiling, raising their drinks. 8, 7, I noticed something strange in the TV feed. The house looked dark, no lights on inside, no silhouettes moving behind the windows. 6, 5, I nudged my friend and pointed at the screen. He frowned but didn't say anything. 4, the camera angle shifted slightly like someone outside had moved. 3, on the TV, the front door opened. The house was empty, no people, no movement, just a hollow, dark interior. 2, my chest tightened. I realized no one in the room was breathing loudly, no coughing, no shuffling, just voices counting. 1, everyone cheered. Confetti popped somewhere behind me. On the TV, the footage rewound, fast. The empty house played backward, door closing, street lights flickering, cars disappearing, until the screen froze on a date in the corner. January 1st, years ago. The power went out. Someone screamed, then the lights snapped back on. Music resumed mid-song. People laughed. Someone clinked glasses and shouted, "Happy New Year!" Like nothing happened. I looked at my phone. 12:03 a.m. I grabbed my jacket and told my friends we were leaving. Two of them argued. One said I was overreacting. Another said I probably drank too much. But one friend looked as shaken as I felt. We walked out without saying goodbye. Outside, the street was silent. No fireworks, no distant cheers, no cars driving by. Our breath fogged in the cold air. When we reached the car, my friend stopped. "Did you notice something?" he asked. I asked what. "There were no coats," he said. "No one had a jacket, not even by the door." We drove away. The next day, curiosity got the better of me. I searched the address. The house existed, but it wasn't listed as occupied. According to public records, it had been condemned after a fire. Date of the incident, New Year's Eve. Cause, unknown electrical failure. Casualties, unconfirmed. Official numbers were never released. Witness statements mentioned loud music, overcrowding, and a power outage shortly before midnight. No parties have been reported there since. What bothers me most isn't what we saw on the TV. It's that sometimes, when New Year's Eve comes around, I get messages in old group chats from accounts that don't exist anymore, just an address. And the words, "Party's still going." We thought camping on New Year's Eve would be peaceful. That was the whole point. None of us were big on crowds, and after a rough year, the idea of being somewhere quiet when the clock rolled over felt right. No parties, no noise, just a fire, some drinks, and the woods. There were 4 of us. We drove for hours, deeper into state land than we probably should have. No cell service for the last 40 minutes. The road turned from pavement to gravel, then to dirt, then to nothing at all. We parked near a trail marker and hiked the rest of the way in. The campsite wasn't official, just a clearing we'd used once before. Trees on all sides, thick and tall, blocking out most of the sky. The kind of place where sound doesn't travel far. By the time we set up tents, it was already dark. The woods were quiet in that unnatural way they get during winter. No insects, no birds, just the occasional creak of trees shifting in the cold. We built a small fire and cracked open drinks. Someone joked about how everyone else was probably screaming over music right now while we sat freezing in the middle of nowhere. I checked my phone. 11:34 p.m. No service, obviously, but the time still worked. As midnight got closer, the mood shifted. Not in a bad way, just quieter, more reflective. We talked about the year ending, things we wanted to leave behind, things we hoped wouldn't follow us into the next one. At 11:58, one of my friends said we should do a countdown anyway. We all laughed but agreed. That's when we heard the first firework. It wasn't loud. It was distant, muffled, like it came from far away. We all looked at each other. There were no towns nearby, no roads close enough for fireworks to carry like that. Then another one went off, and another. They weren't exploding overhead. They sounded low, almost flat, like they were being set off close to the ground. We stood up, scanning the trees. A flash of light flickered between the trunks to the east. Not above us, through the forest. Someone joked that maybe another group was camping nearby, but none of us had seen anyone else all day. No cars, no footprints, no voices. The fireworks continued, one after another, spaced out like someone setting them off deliberately. Then, we heard cheering. It was faint at first, a crowd sound, laughter, people shouting excitedly. I remember feeling confused more than scared. "Who is that?" someone asked. The cheering got louder, like it was moving closer. We stepped away from the fire, trying to pinpoint the direction. More flashes lit up the woods now, bursts of color reflecting off tree bark, lighting up branches for split seconds at a time. The sounds didn't echo the way fireworks should. They felt contained, smothered by the trees. I checked my phone again, 11:59 p.m. Then the countdown started. Not us, a crowd. 10! The voice wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. It felt like it was coming, from all directions at once. 9! The cheering swelled. 8! My chest tightened. I remember thinking it sounded like a lot of people, too many for the middle of nowhere. 7! The fire at our campsite flickered violently, even though there was no wind. 6! The flashes grew brighter, closer now. I could see individual sparks falling through branches. 5! Someone whispered. "This isn't right." 4! I realized the crowd didn't sound drunk. No slurred words, no chaos, just pure excitement. 3. The woods lit up so bright I had to squint. 2. The cheering reached a peak. 1. Silence, instant, complete. No echoes, no fading sound. The fireworks stopped mid-pattern. The woods went dark again. We stood there, frozen, listening. Then the normal night sound slowly returned, the fire crackling, the distant wind moving through branches. I checked my phone. 12:06 a.m. None of us said Happy New Year. We packed up early, not panicked, just quiet, like we'd all silently agreed something was off. We left the fire pit exactly how we found it and started hiking back toward the car. That's when we noticed the ground. Scattered around the trail were burned-out firework shells, dozens of them, some old, some newer. We stopped and picked one up. The date stamped on the side wasn't from this year, it was from decades ago. Another one nearby had a different year, and another. They weren't from one celebration, they were from many, all from New Year's Eve. We reached the car just before dawn. No one talked much on the drive home. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me. I contacted a local ranger and casually asked if fireworks were common in that area. He paused for a long time before answering. Then he asked why. I told him what we heard. He sighed and said people had reported similar things for years. Lights in the woods, cheering, fireworks where no one should be. He said officially, there was nothing there. Unofficially, the land used to host large gatherings decades ago. Unregulated celebrations, people camping, drinking, lighting fireworks deep in the forest. Until one year, a fire broke out. It spread fast. People panicked, ran in different directions, got lost. Some were never accounted for. Search teams found remnants of celebrations scattered through the woods for years afterward. When I asked him why people still hear it, he said something that stuck with me. Some nights don't realize they're over. Every New Year's Eve since then, I listen carefully at midnight, and sometimes, beneath the real fireworks, I swear I hear another crowd counting down, still celebrating, still waiting for the year to change. I spent one New Year's Eve completely alone, and not by choice. I was driving back from visiting family, trying to make it home before midnight. The weather wasn't supposed to be bad, just light snow. But by the time I hit the highway, it had turned into something worse. Thick flakes fell fast, clinging to the windshield no matter how high I cranked the wipers. Traffic slowed to a crawl. Then it stopped. Cars idled for a while before people started turning engines off. Someone walked past my window and said there'd been an accident miles ahead. No ETA. Could be hours. I checked the time. 10:47 p.m. There was no way I was making it home. After about 30 minutes of sitting still, I noticed a side road a few cars ahead. A few drivers were turning around, heading off the highway. I followed them, figuring anything was better than freezing in place. The road led away from the highway and into nothing. No streetlights, no houses, just trees and snow. Eventually, I saw a small sign pointing toward a town I'd never heard of. No distance listed, just a name. I followed it. The road narrowed and twisted until, suddenly, the trees opened up and I was driving down a quiet main street. The town looked old. Not abandoned, but untouched. Brick storefronts, antique street lamps casting a dull yellow glow. Snow piled neatly along sidewalks like it had been shoveled earlier. I parked near the center of town and stepped out of my car. It was silent. No music, no traffic, no voices, but every building had lights on. I walked past a diner, a hardware store, a movie theater with posters that looked decades out of date. The windows were clear, but I couldn't see anyone inside. At the end of the street stood a small clock tower. The clock read 11:58 p.m. I remember feeling relieved. At least I hadn't missed midnight. I pulled out my phone. No service. The time on my phone matched the clock tower. I decided to wait it out in the diner. The door was unlocked, warm air spilling out as I stepped inside. The place smelled like coffee. Every booth was empty, but the lights were on, and a pot was brewing behind the counter like someone had just stepped away. I sat near the window, watching snow drift past. At 11:59 p.m., the lights flickered. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. I realized I could hear other clocks too, faint ticking coming from somewhere deeper in the building. Then, all at once, they stopped. The clock hand froze. So did the clock tower outside. That's when I noticed something else. The snow had stopped falling, not slowly, instantly. Everything outside the window looked frozen in place. At exactly midnight, a bell rang. Not from the clock tower, from everywhere. Church bells, alarm bells, bells I couldn't identify. They rang together in perfect sync, filling the air with noise that felt too big for such a small town. I stood up, heart racing, and stepped back outside. The street was brighter. Now, every light seemed stronger, harsher. Doors began opening. People stepped out of buildings slowly, calmly, like they'd been waiting for a signal. They filled the sidewalks and street, all dressed strangely. Outdated coats, old-fashioned hats, clothes that didn't belong to the same decade. No one spoke. They didn't look at each other. They all looked at me. I backed away instinctively. No fear showed on their faces, just curiosity, mild interest, like they were trying to remember something. A man near the clock tower raised his hand. The bells stopped. He spoke, his voice echoing unnaturally. "You're early." I asked what he meant. He frowned slightly, then looked up at the frozen clock. "No," he corrected himself, "you're late." The people around me began whispering, not words, just low sounds like distant conversations overlapping. I asked where I was. The man sighed. "This is where the year ends," he said. "It always has to end somewhere." I didn't understand what that meant, and I told him so. He nodded like he expected that answer. "You're not supposed to remember this," he said. "Most don't." I asked how to leave. That seemed to bother him. The whispering grew louder. He glanced around, then pointed back toward the road I'd driven in on. "When the clock moves again," he said, "you can go." I asked what happens if it doesn't. He didn't answer. The crowd slowly stepped closer, not threateningly, just encroaching, like they were curious how close they could get. I noticed something then. None of them cast shadows. The light hit them, but nothing fell behind their feet. I stepped back again and felt something solid behind me. The diner door. I rushed inside and locked it, even though I didn't know if that mattered. Through the window, I watched the crowd stop at the door, standing perfectly still. The clock tower outside began ticking again. 11:59 p.m. 11:59 p.m. again. The minute repeated, over and over. My phone buzzed. For the first time all night, I had service. A notification popped up, emergency alert. It read, "If you are driving, seek shelter immediately. Roads may be unsafe." The time changed. 12:01 a.m. The town lights dimmed. The people outside blinked like they'd just woken up and turned away from the diner all at once. They went back inside their buildings. Doors closed. The bells never rang again. The snow started falling. I unlocked the door and stepped outside. The town felt empty now, truly empty. The clock tower showed the correct time. I drove out without stopping, following the road back to the highway. By the time I reached it, traffic was moving again, like nothing had happened. I didn't tell anyone about it for a long time. But months later, curiosity got the better of me. I searched for the town. There was no record of it, no maps, no mentions, no history, except one thing, a forum. Post from years earlier, buried deep online. Someone describing a town they stumbled into on New Year's Eve during a snowstorm. Same clock tower, same bells, same words spoken to them. "You're early. You're late." They ended the post with one line that stuck with me. I think some places exist only to mark time, and sometimes people wander into them by mistake. Every New Year's Eve now, I stay home, and when midnight hits, I listen carefully, just in case I hear bells that don't belong to this year. I've never liked New Year's Eve. Even before this happened, something about it made me uncomfortable. The forced excitement. The idea that time flips over all at once, like a switch. Like something important changes even if nothing actually does. The year this happened, I was working overnight at a small call center. Not emergency services, just a contracted after-hours line for property management companies. Floods, broken heaters, lockouts, stuff that usually slows down during the holidays. I volunteered for the shift because it paid extra. There were only 3 of us in the building. Me, another operator on the opposite side of the floor, and a supervisor in a glass office near the front. At 11 p.m., the calls dropped off completely. That wasn't unusual. Most people were busy celebrating, not worrying about leaky pipes. I scrolled on my phone, half watching the digital wall clock above the monitors. 11:32 p.m. At 11:40, my screen lit up with an incoming call. No caller ID, just a blank line. That was unusual, but not unheard of. I answered with the standard greeting. Silence. I waited a few seconds, then asked if anyone was there. The line disconnected. I marked it as a dropped call and went back to waiting. At 11:47, the same thing happened. Blank caller ID, silence, disconnect. By the third call, I mentioned it to my supervisor over chat. He said the system sometimes glitches around holidays and to log it normally. At 11:55, the phone rang again. Same blank ID. This time when I answered, I heard something. Breathing, slow, steady, not labored or rushed, just present. I asked if they needed assistance. The breathing continued for a few seconds longer than felt normal. Then a voice spoke. You made it again. It wasn't threatening, it wasn't emotional. It sounded observational, like someone reading off a fact. I asked who I was speaking with. The line went dead. My skin prickled, but I told myself it was someone messing around. Drunk caller, New Year's prank. I looked at the clock. 11:59 p.m. The entire room felt quieter than it should have. No typing, no phones ringing. Even the hum of the lights felt muted. Then every phone on the floor rang at once, not in sequence, together. I froze. That never happened. I glanced toward my supervisor's office. He was standing, looking around, clearly confused. The wall clock ticked. 11:59 p.m. Again. The minute didn't change. The ringing stopped simultaneously. My phone lit up again. Same blank ID. I answered without thinking. This time the background noise was different. Fireworks, distant cheering, a crowd celebrating, then the same voice. You weren't supposed to be working this year. I swallowed and asked what that meant. The voice ignored the question. You usually answer at home, it said. This makes it harder. I felt my chest tighten. I asked how they knew where I usually was. The voice paused, then said, We check. The line disconnected. I stood up and walked straight to my supervisor's office. He was pale. Did you get a weird call? I asked. He nodded slowly. Before either of us could say more, the wall clock changed. 12:00 a.m. Every monitor flickered. My phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. I hadn't missed a call. It was already there. The timestamp read exactly 12:00 a.m. I didn't want to listen to it, but something in me knew I would. I stepped back to my desk, sat down, and pressed play. At first, there was only static. Then I heard my own voice, not recorded from the call center, from somewhere else, laughing, background music, distant conversation, a party. Then the voice I'd heard before spoke over it. This one didn't answer, it said calmly. The recording skipped. My voice again, this time tired, quiet. Saying goodnight to someone, another skip. Silence, then the voice again. This one answered late. The voicemail ended. My hands were shaking. I checked the call logs. There were dozens of blank ID calls listed under my extension, all time-stamped at exactly midnight, from different years. I scrolled. Last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, all marked as answered, all by me. I felt sick. I went back through older voicemails. Most were corrupted. Some wouldn't play at all, but a few worked. Each one was different background noise, different versions of my voice, different places, but always the same calm voice speaking like it was taking notes. This one answered. This one didn't. This one made it. I confronted my supervisor again. He said something that made my stomach drop. He told me the system showed I'd been assigned to New Year's Eve shifts far longer than I'd worked there, longer than the company had existed. My employee ID didn't have a creation date, just a list of midnight timestamps. I went home early. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I searched for the number that kept calling. There wasn't one, but I found something else, a forum thread, years old, barely any replies. People describing strange calls at midnight on New Year's Eve, blank IDs, breathing, a voice telling them they made it. Some posters said it happened once, others said it happened every year. A few said it stopped. Those posts never continued. That night, I checked my voicemail one more time. There was a new one, time-stamped for the next year's midnight, Not playable yet. Every New Year's Eve since, I turn my phone off before midnight. I don't answer calls, I don't listen to voicemails, but sometimes when the clock hits 12, my phone vibrates anyway. No notification, no missed call. Just a brief buzz, like something checking to see if I'm still here, still answering, still making it.